My sister and I always loved going to our cousin's house in Oregon. It sat at the edge of a dense pine forest, far from the main road, the kind of place where the air smelled like rain and wood smoke. Our cousins, Brooke and Tyler, were older by a few years, which made everything they did seem cooler, even when it wasn't. That weekend, my parents were off on a trip to Seattle, and we were staying over for 2 nights. The plan was simple: pizza, movies, and sleeping bags in the living room. Brooke had promised it'd be the best sleepover ever. It almost was. We arrived late in the afternoon, the fog still hanging low in the trees. Aunt Claire greeted us, smiling, but there was something tired in her face. "You kids behave," she said, glancing toward the staircase that led up to the second floor. "And please, don't go poking around upstairs, especially not the closet at the end of the hall." Tyler smirked. "You're still doing that?" His mom gave him a sharp look. "Just remember the rule." I thought she was joking, maybe trying to creep us out a little. Brooke caught my expression and leaned close. "She's serious. Nobody opens that closet, ever." That was all it took to make me obsessed. Dinner was normal. We played a few video games, made popcorn, told ghost stories by the fireplace. But every time someone went upstairs for the bathroom, I caught myself glancing down that long, dim hallway at the top of the stairs. There it was, a plain white door, at the very end, half hidden by shadow. Nothing special about it. Yet somehow, it felt aware of me. When we finally set up our sleeping bags in the living room, the lights were low and the fire was dying. Brooke fell asleep first. Then Tyler, my sister Emma, whispered to me from the next sleeping bag, "You thinking what I'm thinking?" I didn't even need to answer. We both knew. At 12:47 a.m., we crept up the stairs barefoot, trying not to make a sound. The hallway creaked under our feet. The closer we got, the colder the air became, like stepping into a refrigerator. We stopped in front of the door. The brass knob gleamed faintly under the hall nightlight. "Maybe it's just storage," Emma whispered. "Only one way to find out." I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and turned the knob. It clicked. The door swung open without a sound. Inside was nothing. Just a narrow, empty space filled with darkness so thick it looked solid. The air was icy, and it smelled faintly of dust and something metallic. Emma frowned. "See? Boring." I exhaled, half relieved, half disappointed. Guess the legend's fake. We both turned to go back downstairs. That's when the door slammed shut behind us. The knob twisted and locked from the inside. The sound of that door slamming was louder than it should have been, sharp, final, like a gunshot muffled by walls. Emma yelped, spinning around. I grabbed the knob and twisted hard. Nothing. It didn't budge. "Stop messing around," she said, half laughing. "I'm not." I rattled it harder. "It's locked." There was no latch, no keyhole, nothing on the inside, just smooth wood. I pushed, kicked, slammed my shoulder against it, useless. The door wouldn't even shake. "Maybe Brooke's pranking us," Emma said, her voice shaky now. "How?" "She's downstairs." The darkness inside felt heavier the longer we stood there. It wasn't pitch black anymore, more like a smoky gray. The walls looked closer than before, though I hadn't seen them move. Then I noticed the temperature. My breath came out white. I could see it. "Emma, do you feel that?" She nodded slowly. "It's freezing." We stood back to back, trying to see something. Anything. The closet was barely wide enough for us both to stand. My shoulder brushed against rough wood paneling. That's when I heard it. A soft sound behind the wall, like fingernails dragging down wood. "Did you hear that?" She swallowed. "Yeah." Scratch, 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 slow, deliberate, getting closer. "Hey," I shouted, pounding on the door. "Brooke, Tyler, let us out." No answer. The scratching stopped. For a few seconds there was only silence. Then faintly something breathed. Long, slow, too deep to be human. Emma's hand clutched mine so tight my fingers went numb. "What's in here?" she whispered. "I don't know." We both looked up when we heard another sound, something moving overhead, like someone crawling along the ceiling, nails dragging as it shifted. Dust rained down from above. "Stop!" I yelled again. My voice echoed strangely, distorted, like the sound was bouncing off somewhere farther away than the space around us. Then came a knock, from behind us. Not on the door, but from inside the wall. 3 slow knocks, then silence. I pressed my ear to the paneling. A whisper came through, faint but close. "You shouldn't have opened it." Emma screamed. I stumbled backward, slamming against the opposite wall, but it wasn't there anymore. My back hit empty space. I fell backward into darkness that shouldn't have existed, deeper than any closet could go. Emma's scream echoed above me, then cut off. And suddenly there was nothing, just the sound of breathing again. Except this time it wasn't mine. Tyler woke first. At first he thought the noise was just a branch scraping against the siding. Then it came again. Bang, bang, bang. From upstairs. He sat up, blinking in the dark living room. The clock on the wall read 1:06 a.m. The fire was out, and the air felt heavy, like the house was holding its breath. "Brooke," he whispered. She groaned, rolling over. "What?" "Listen." They both froze. From the ceiling above came muffled thuds, frantic, uneven, then scratching, long, ragged claws dragging across wood. Brooke sat up fast. "That's the hall closet." Tyler's stomach tightened. No way they actually went up there. They grabbed the flashlight from the coffee table and crept upstairs. Each step groaned beneath their feet. The closer they got, the louder it became. The banging, the scratching, a faint, terrified voice shouting for help. Brooke's voice cracked. "Emma? Noah?" The banging stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. They reached the end of the hallway. The closet door was shaking slightly, like something inside was pressing against it. Tyler grabbed the knob and twisted. It didn't move. "Locked?" Brooke whispered. "Yeah, but there's no lock on this door." Then came the whispers. Too quiet to understand, but layered, overlapping, as though multiple voices were speaking from inside. Some were crying, others were laughing. Tyler stepped back, shining the flashlight at the wood. That's when they saw the marks. Long, deep scratches down the door. Fresh. "Go get Mom," Brooke hissed. But before he could move, a loud thud hit the door from the inside, making the frame shudder. A voice came through, faint, desperate. "Help us." That was Noah. Tyler knew his voice. He rushed forward, slamming his shoulder against the wood. "Hold on, we're getting you out." Brooke ran downstairs, screaming for Aunt Claire. Within seconds, the lights flickered on. Their mother came running, panic on her face. "What happened?" "They're inside. They're stuck in the closet," Tyler shouted. Aunt Claire's face went pale. "You opened it?" Before anyone could answer, another sound came. Soft knocking from inside, followed by Emma's voice, crying, "Please, let us out. It's dark. We can't see." Claire dropped to her knees, pressing her ear against the door. "Emma, honey, step back." She grabbed the doorknob and pulled hard. It didn't move. She tried again, shaking it, until her hands turned red. Nothing. Brooke started sobbing. "We have to break it." Tyler grabbed the small hammer from the hallway drawer. "On 3. They hit the door again and again. Splinters flew. The voices inside grew louder, screaming now, muffled by the wood. Then, just as the door cracked open, everything went silent. When the door finally gave way, it didn't burst open. It collapsed. The wood splintered like something old and brittle, falling in chunks onto the floor. The flashlight beam cut through the dust that swirled up like smoke. For a long, breathless moment, none of them moved. Inside the closet was nothing, just an empty, narrow space lined with cold wooden panels. No Emma. No Noah. Tyler's voice cracked. They were just, they were right there. Brooke stepped closer, shining the flashlight into the corners. The light flickered strangely, like the beam was being swallowed. Aunt Claire whispered, "Back away. Now." But Tyler leaned in. "Emma, Noah." Something caught his eye on the inside wall, faint grooves in the wood. He raised the light. The marks were deep, jagged, layered over each other like dozens of clawed hands had tried to dig their way out. And in between the scratches were letters. Not written, but carved. "Let us out." Brooke screamed. Aunt Claire yanked her backward, slamming the doorframe shut. The house seemed to exhale. A low, hollow sound rippled through the hallway, almost like a sigh. They called the police. Search teams combed the entire house, the basement, the attic, even the crawl space beneath the floorboards. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. Every window was locked from the inside. The only thing they found was one of Noah's socks wedged under the door, and Emma's bracelet inside the closet hanging from a nail. By sunrise, the officers were gone, leaving behind only questions no one could answer. For weeks, the family stayed elsewhere. Brooke refused to sleep upstairs. Tyler wouldn't go near that hallway. Aunt Claire nailed the closet shut, layer after layer of boards, until not even the outline of the door was visible anymore. But sometimes late at night, she swears she hears tapping from behind the wall. 3 soft knocks, then silence. Months later, when the house finally went up for sale, the new owners started renovations. On their first night, the contractor texted the realtor at 2 a.m., saying he couldn't finish the work. He'd found something strange while stripping the wallpaper in the upstairs hall. Long scratches, fresh ones, right where the closet had been. And in the middle of the wall, someone had carved shallow words with something sharp uneven. "We're still here." The sleepover at Jenna's house wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just 4 friends, too much junk food, and a cheap camcorder her dad found in the garage. It was a chunky black Panasonic from the late 90s, the kind with a tiny flip-out screen and that faint mechanical whir when it recorded. "It still works." Jenna grinned, pressing record. The red light blinked to life. "Okay, say hi to future us." Maya threw a pillow at her. "Future us is going to cringe at this." "Whatever," Brooke said, sipping soda. "We're making history. VHS history." The 4th girl, Lila, smiled quietly from the corner. She was the shy one, always half hidden behind her hair. It was late March, a cold weekend in suburban Illinois. Jenna's parents were away for the night, leaving them the entire house, creaky floors, flickering kitchen light, and all. They'd dragged sleeping bags into the living room and turned on old horror movies, daring each other to stay awake till sunrise. Halfway through the Blair Witch Project, Maya had the idea. "Let's make our own horror movie." "Yeah," Brooke said. "Sleepover from hell." Jenna laughed. "We'll shoot everything tonight and watch it tomorrow morning." They spent the next hour filming dumb scenes, fake scares in the dark hallway, Brooke pretending to be possessed, Lila whispering ominous warnings from behind a curtain. The laughter never stopped. At around 2:30 a.m., the girls set up the camera on the coffee table, facing the couch. The red light blinked steadily as they piled under blankets, eating chips and talking about boys, college, and ghost stories. Eventually, their conversation drifted into that soft, sleepy rhythm of 3 a.m. talk. Quiet giggles, the hum of the heater, the occasional creak of the house settling. Then faintly, there was a sound, like footsteps upstairs. Jenna paused mid-sentence. "Did you hear that?" Brooke rolled her eyes. "Old house chill." They laughed it off and kept talking until one by one, they dozed off. The camcorder kept recording. Hours later, the tape ran out. The red light clicked off. The house was silent again. By morning, everything felt normal. The girls joked about their movie, made pancakes, and went home laughing. It wasn't until that afternoon, when Jenna decided to play back the footage, that she noticed something wrong. At first, everything looked exactly as they remembered. The jokes, the laughter, the soft candlelight from the coffee table. But halfway through the tape, at 2:47 a.m., something moved in the background. A figure. Tall, shadowy, walking slowly across the edge of the frame behind them. None of them remembered anyone standing there. Jenna paused the tape. Her stomach twisted. "Did you see that?" she whispered, rewinding slowly. Maya and Brooke leaned over the tiny screen. Lila's fingers trembled as she held her soda cup. At first it was subtle, just a dark silhouette at the edge of the couch, but frame by frame it moved. A tall, thin shape gliding silently behind them, almost floating. Its features were impossible to make out, just a dark blur against the living room wall. Brooke laughed nervously. "It's probably a coat or the curtain, right?" "No," Jenna said, shaking her head. "Pause it. Right there. Look at its head." The shadow turned toward the camera. Even on the tiny flip-out screen, the face was unmistakable. A vague outline of something smiling. Not a normal smile. Stretched too wide, like it had no lips, just a pale, grinning slash across the darkness. Lila gasped, dropping the soda. The liquid spread across the carpet, but none of them noticed. "It wasn't there when we were filming," Maya said, voice shaking. Jenna fast-forwarded the tape. The figure was closer now, as if the act of watching made it move. It drifted silently behind them, lingering near the edge of the blanket where Lila slept, then stopped, head cocked toward the lens. "Maybe it's a glitch," Brooke muttered. But even she sounded unsure. By the time the tape ended, their unease had turned into fear. The living room looked empty. There was nothing there in real life. Yet on the screen, the figure seemed to linger for a heartbeat longer than physics should allow, just staring. That night they couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the room seemed too dark, every corner too still. Lila refused to go near the coffee table. Maya slept with one eye open. Jenna kept checking the camcorder, making sure it was off. The next evening, Jenna suggested they forget about it and watch a movie together. But by 10 p.m., Brooke realized something was missing. Lila wasn't in her room, nor was she anywhere else. They called her name, shaking the house awake. Jenna's parents rushed in, no response. The front door was locked, all windows intact. Nothing. Panic rose quickly. Jenna grabbed the old camcorder from the shelf. "We have to see the tape again," she said. Huddled in the living room, they rewound to the same frame. The shadow was closer now. Its head had lifted, clearly turned toward the camera. And the grin, that grin was wider than before. And somehow, directed at them, the house felt wrong that night. Even Jenna's parents, trying to act calm, avoided going upstairs. Brooke and Maya sat huddled on the living room couch, eyes darting to every corner. The camcorder rested on the coffee table, powered off, but they didn't dare touch it. At midnight, Jenna couldn't resist. She picked it up, pressing play again, though no one spoke. The familiar red light blinked to life. The footage played, showing them from the previous night. Laughter, blankets, popcorn. But then the shadow appeared. It drifted closer than it had before, emerging from the corner as though drawn toward the lens. Jenna swallowed hard. "It's moving." Brooke shivered. "It shouldn't be able to do that." A sudden knock came from the hallway, not soft but deliberate, 3 sharp knocks. All 3 froze. The clock ticked slowly. The camcorder whirred. In the reflection of its tiny screen, Jenna thought she saw something behind them. A blur, dark, tall, leaning just outside the circle of the living room light. "Don't turn around," Maya whispered, but Jenna couldn't help herself. Slowly she turned. The hallway was empty. Still the air felt heavier. Cold. A faint smell of metal. Something iron-like, sharp. Then, the camera on the coffee table whirred on by itself. The red light blinked steadily, though it had been powered off. Brooke screamed, "It's recording!" The viewfinder showed the living room from a slightly different angle, and there it was. The shadow, now standing closer than ever, only a few feet from them. Its head tilted unnaturally, its grin clear even in the dim light. The girls scrambled, tripping over blankets and snacks. Jenna lunged forward to turn it off, but the camcorder slipped from her hands. It hit the floor, and for a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then the figure moved toward the lens, and with a sudden fluid motion, it vanished from the room entirely. They thought it was gone. Until morning. The police were called. Search teams combed the house. There was no trace of Lila, no signs of forced entry, windows locked, doors intact. Only the camcorder, resting on the coffee table, still blinking red. When they played the tape again, it had changed. The shadow was closer, just inches from the camera, and its grin was unmistakable, directed straight at them. It hadn't been on tape before. Now it was waiting, watching. The following night, Jenna, Brooke, and Maya didn't sleep. They barricaded themselves in the living room, the camcorder untouched on the table. Every sound, the hum of the heater, the distant creak of floorboards, made them jump. Around 2:50 a.m., the camcorder powered on by itself again. The red light blinked steadily like a heartbeat. Brooke whispered, "It's starting again." The viewfinder displayed the living room from an impossible angle, as if the camera had shifted on its own. And there it was, the shadow. Standing closer than the night before, impossibly tall, its grin wide and wrong, its head tilted unnaturally, watching, waiting. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. It knows we're here. Jenna felt frozen, her gaze locked on the screen. The shadow's movement was subtle, a lean forward, a tilt of the head, but every motion radiated menace. Then came the whisper, low, breathy, almost behind their ears. "You're next." They screamed. The lights flickered. The camcorder fell sideways, spinning on the floor. They ran upstairs, barricading themselves in Brooke's bedroom. Minutes passed. Endless minutes. The house seemed alive, groaning and settling, shadows twisting unnaturally in the corners. When the sun finally rose, they crept downstairs. The living room was silent. The camcorder lay on its side, screen dark. Everything appeared normal, until Jenna picked it up. They pressed play. The footage showed the previous night, everything as it had happened. The girls on the couch, the camcorder recording, the shadow in the corner, moving closer. Then the final frames froze. The shadow was no longer at the edge of the room. It was inches from the camera lens, its head tilted toward them, and that grin, wide, pale, impossible, filled the screen. But this time, in the very last frame, a hand reached out. One of the girls' hands. Maya screamed. Brooke ran to the kitchen. Jenna dropped the camcorder. It landed face down, and the lens cracked. The girls never saw Lila again, and sometimes, when Jenna checks the old footage, she swears the shadow is closer than it was before. Grinning, waiting, patient. Even now, late at night, the faint mechanical whir of a camcorder can be heard, somewhere in the darkness. Recording. Ryan's farmhouse had always been the ultimate sleepover spot. Set at the end of a long gravel road in rural Ohio, it sat isolated among rolling fields and skeletal trees. Its paint was peeling, shutters hung crooked, and the attic windows were boarded up. But to Ryan and his friends, Jake, Carter, Logan, and Miles, it was perfect. The boys arrived around 7 p.m., rain hammering the tin roof, lightning flashing across the empty fields. They dragged sleeping bags through the creaking front door, the smell of aged wood and dust filling the air. Ryan grinned. "Best sleepover ever. No adults, no rules. Except maybe, don't wake the ghosts." Jake laughed. "Ghosts, really?" "Come on," Carter said, setting down a box of snacks. "This place has history. People say the previous owners disappeared overnight. Farmhands mostly. Nobody knows why." Logan smirked. Perfect. Let's make a game out of it. Ghost stories dares, and whoever's too scared has to sleep on the floor by the fireplace. Miles rolled his eyes. I'm not scared. By 9 p.m., they'd settled into the living room. Candles flickered despite the storm outside, shadows dancing across the old wooden walls. They told ghost stories, some improvised, some they'd read online, daring each other to be the first to sleep on the cold floorboards. Jake, your turn, Ryan said, pointing to the floor near the fireplace. Jake grumbled but complied. Fine. Happy? The storm grew louder. Thunder rattled the windows. Rain leaked through the eaves, dripping onto the carpet in small, irregular puddles. The boys laughed nervously at each clap of thunder, the kind that sounded like footsteps across the porch. At midnight, the lights flickered. Carter grabbed a flashlight, sweeping it across the room. It's fine. Probably just the storm, he said. Yeah, Logan added, trying to sound confident. It's just an old house. Old houses make noises. The floor creaked beneath their sleeping bags as they settled in for the night. Eventually, one by one, the boys drifted to sleep, the storm outside a steady, ominous backdrop. It was around 2:03 a.m. when Jake jolted awake. Something cold touched his ankle. At first he laughed, thinking it was Carter or Logan playing a prank. But the laughter died when he realized the room was still. Everyone else sound asleep. Something was under the bed. Jake froze, staring at his ankle. The hand had vanished. His heart pounded as he slowly lifted the blanket, peering toward the floor. The room smelled colder, damp, like the rain had seeped into the walls. He whispered, "Guys, wake up." No response. Everyone else was asleep, curled in their sleeping bags. Carter's face was calm under the flickering candlelight. Logan's chest rose and fell rhythmically. Miles didn't even stir. Jake swallowed hard and leaned closer to the edge of the bed. Something dark glimmered in the shadows. A torn piece of cloth, dirtied and frayed, clutched in a pale, hand-like shape. He recoiled. What the hell? The boys slowly woke as Jake shook them. Someone's under the bed. Someone was. They shined flashlights underneath. The beam hit the floor, only dust, a few cobwebs, and that small scrap of fabric. No person. No sign of anyone else in the house. Just the leftover piece of shirt, soaking in the damp. Ryan frowned. Probably a raccoon or something. But the piece of cloth wasn't furred. It wasn't an animal, and there was something about it. The smell of old sweat, of iron, like blood had been on it recently. The lights flickered. A low hum filled the room. The storm outside seemed to quiet, but inside the farmhouse had grown heavier. The air felt viscous, pressing against their chests. Then the power went out completely. Pitch black. Only the faint flash of lightning illuminated the room. And then, a voice. Low, breathy, barely audible. You took my spot. The boys froze, heartbeats pounding in unison. The voice came from under the bed, closer than any of them dared to look. Carter shined his flashlight directly under the bed. Nothing moved, only the scrap of cloth. Logan swallowed, trembling. It's just the storm, right? But the air grew colder. The whisper came again, this time clearer. You took my spot. Miles backed away toward the door. We need to leave. Now. Before anyone could argue, the floor beneath them creaked. Slow, deliberate. Something heavy moved in the shadows beneath the bed. Something that didn't belong. Ryan grabbed a chair and leaned it against the bed. Stay together. Don't look under there. The voice chuckled softly. Low, amused, like it had been waiting decades for someone to trespass. And in that instant the boys realized this was no prank. No storm. The farmhouse had never been empty. The storm rattled the windows as the boys huddled near the fireplace, flashlight beams darting across the walls. Rain hammered the tin roof, echoing like a drumbeat. Every creak of the floorboards made their hearts leap. Jake swallowed hard. It's under the bed. I saw it. Carter shook his head. No. You think you saw it. It's just the storm. The house. Old boards settling. But Logan wasn't convinced. He shined his flashlight under the bed again, hoping to calm himself. His stomach dropped. The hand was there. Pale, thin, long fingers curling slowly around the edge of the bed. The scrap of shirt still clutched in its grip. Holy, Logan whispered. The hand twitched, jerking slightly as if testing the air. The boys stumbled back, tripping over blankets. The voice came again, this time laughing softly, dry and hollow. You took my spot. Jake grabbed a chair. He swung it at the edge of the bed. The hand recoiled but didn't disappear. The fingers flexed, curling as if gripping invisible air. Ryan's heart pounded. We need to leave. Get out. Now. Miles rushed toward the door, but the doorknob rattled violently, locked from the inside. The house groaned. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, moving without source. Then came a sound like scraping, slow, deliberate, moving beneath the floorboards. The boys froze. Something was pacing under the house, circling, waiting. Did you hear that? Brooke? No, wait, wrong story. Logan gasped. It's walking, under the floor. Lightning illuminated the room briefly. For a fraction of a second, they saw the outline of a face under the bed, hollow eyes, pale skin, mouth stretched unnaturally wide in that same grin, hovering just inches from Jake's foot. Carter screamed and kicked the bed. The figure flinched, then retreated slightly. The whisper came again, soft, right at Jake's ear. You took my spot. The lights flickered back on briefly. Nothing was there, only the scrap of fabric. Ryan tried reasoning, panic-stricken. Maybe it's a spirit, a ghost. It's just angry. If we leave it, maybe it'll stop. But the house wasn't done. The floors vibrated as if something massive was beneath them. The ceiling groaned. Rainwater leaked through in irregular patches, forming puddles that reflected shapes that weren't theirs. And then the voice changed, almost giddy now. I'm very patient. The boys screamed and grabbed blankets to barricade themselves against the bed. Sleep was impossible. The farmhouse itself had become alive, aware of every breath, every movement, every heartbeat. They knew it wouldn't let them leave easily. The house fell silent as suddenly as the storm had intensified. The lights flickered, then died completely, plunging the room into pure black. Only the flash of lightning through the windows provided brief, stark illumination. Jake, Ryan, Carter, Logan, and Miles huddled together, shivering. The air was icy, thick with a smell of damp earth and something metallic. Every heartbeat sounded deafening. Then it came again. The whisper, clear this time, just beneath their ears. You took my spot. The boys scrambled, pressing themselves against the wall. The hand emerged again from under the bed, long, pale fingers curling and twitching. Slowly it began to pull itself out. And as it rose, so did the rest of the figure, tall, shadowy, impossibly thin, wearing a shirt that matched the scrap they'd found. The face was pale and gaunt, eyes hollow, mouth stretched in a wide grin. A cold, silent rage radiated from it. Run! Jake screamed, but the front door slammed shut with deafening force. Windows rattled violently. The storm outside seemed to respond to the house itself. The figure hovered a foot from the floor, hands reaching, moving closer to Jake. Its whisper turned into a soft, mocking laugh. Ryan grabbed a chair, swinging at it, but the figure wasn't solid. The chair passed through fingers like smoke. A low, guttural growl filled the room. Miles cried out, shoving the others toward the back door, but it too refused to budge. Panic clawed at their throats. Then the voice, no longer from under the bed, filled the room, omnipresent. This is my spot. The figure lunged. A sudden jolt of cold and darkness enveloped the boys. Screams echoed in the empty farmhouse. The sound of dragging, like fingernails across wood, followed. When the storm cleared at dawn, the farmhouse appeared empty. The bed was made neatly, blankets untouched. Chairs lay where they had been. The 5 boys were gone. The only trace was a small, torn scrap of shirt clutched in the corner of the room, soaked from the storm and imprinted with long, deep scratches, as if someone had fought to stay in that spot, in that bed. And sometimes, when the wind rustles the trees near the farmhouse, locals swear they hear a faint whisper carried from inside. "You took my spot." It started as one of those late-semester dares that sound harmless when you're bored and half-drunk. There were 6 of us that night: Noah Reed, Chloe Davis, Ethan Gray, Liam Brooks, Sophie Turner, and Marcus Hale. We were all juniors at Hartwell University, trying to kill time before the holidays. Marcus, the loud one, said, "Let's stay up all night. No phones, no lights, just stories and snacks." He grinned like he'd invented something brilliant. "We'll record the whole thing on my camcorder. Proof that we didn't chicken out." We gathered in Ridgeview Apartments, an old off-campus building near the edge of the forest. The place creaked with every gust of winter wind, the kind of sound that could make silence feel alive. Snow tapped the window and the heater groaned like it wanted to quit. We sat in a circle on the carpet, a few candles burning, bags of chips, half-empty soda cans. Marcus placed the camera on a stack of textbooks facing us, its red record light blinking steady. At first, it was fun. Chloe told dumb ghost stories from childhood, Ethan joked about demons living in student dorms, and Sophie pretended to summon one using the candle wax. We laughed until the flame flickered strangely, stretching shadows tall against the wall. "Wind," Liam said. But none of the windows were open. By midnight, the laughter faded. The silence got thicker, heavier. The shadows around the room didn't seem to stay still anymore. They swayed, pulsing with each breath. I remember Chloe whispering, "Does anyone else feel like someone's watching us?" No one answered. We just kept glancing toward the corners of the room, waiting for one of us to joke again. No one did. By 2:10 a.m., the candles had burned halfway down, dripping wax across the coffee table. The air inside the apartment felt strange, thicker somehow, like breathing through cloth. Outside, the wind had stopped completely. It was too quiet, as if the whole town had fallen asleep except us. Ethan rubbed his temples. "Does it feel off to anyone else?" "What do you mean?" Sophie asked. He pointed toward the far wall. "The shadows. They keep changing shape." We all looked. For a few seconds, nothing. Then one of the darker patches in the corner seemed to ripple, like heat over asphalt. When I blinked, it was gone. Chloe forced a laugh. "Okay, we're all overtired. Let's just tell another story." But Marcus grinned. "No, this is perfect. The hallucination stage. Keep the lights off." "Marcus, come on," Liam muttered. "You're freaking people out." He ignored him, leaning toward the camcorder. "If something weird happens, we'll catch it, that's the point, right?" The red recording light flickered. Once, twice. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the camera made a soft clicking noise. Ethan froze. "Did you hear that?" Marcus frowned. "Battery's fine." Then Ethan's voice went tight. "There's someone sitting by the window." We all turned. The curtains were closed, but the shape of someone, sat behind them. Still, unmoving. "Who is that?" Sophie whispered. "Marcus, tell me that's not a reflection." Marcus swallowed. "The window doesn't face anything, just the parking lot." For a moment, no one breathed. The candle nearest the window guttered low, the flame bending toward that corner like pulled by gravity. I wanted to reach for my phone, but we'd promised no lights, no screens. My hand shook anyway. "We should stop," I said. But before anyone could answer, the camera's red light blinked rapidly, and every candle went out at once. The room dropped into blackness. Someone screamed, high and short, maybe Chloe. and then silence swallowed everything again. I could feel everyone's breath in the dark, hear hearts pounding. Then, from somewhere near the window, a voice whispered softly, calm, genderless, too close to be real. "Don't look." The whisper froze me in place. I didn't know whose voice it was. It didn't sound like any of us. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint hiss of the heater dying out. Chloe's voice shook. "Who said that?" No one answered. Then I heard something scrape across the floor. Slow, dragging like someone crawling. Sophie whimpered and Liam hissed, "Turn on your phone, Noah. I don't care about the stupid rule anymore." My fingers fumbled through my pocket, but before I could hit the flashlight, Marcus snapped, "No, keep recording. Don't ruin the shot." "Are you insane?" Chloe shouted. He lifted the camcorder, the tiny red light blinking in the dark. It became our only source of light, a single glowing dot surrounded by nothing. The camera faced the window. Something shifted there. I saw the curtain move just barely, like fingers brushing against it from the inside. "Marcus," I whispered, "point it lower." He did. And that's when we saw it. A figure crouched by the window, pale skin glowing faintly in the dark. It wasn't solid. Its outline seemed to blur, like static on a bad screen. Its head twitched to one side, then the other, as though it was trying to listen. Sophie sobbed. "Oh my God, what is that?" Ethan whispered. "It's looking at us." The temperature in the room plummeted. Our breath fogged in the air. Then the figure began to crawl toward us, slow, deliberate with a strange jerking rhythm, limbs bending the wrong way. The camcorder's red light caught its face for a single second. It wasn't a face at all, just white skin stretched over where eyes and a mouth should be. Marcus shouted and stumbled back. The camera fell sideways, clattering against the floor. The red light now pointed toward us. And that's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the lens's tiny reflection, there were 7 of us sitting in a circle. One more than there should have been. I turned my head in panic, trying to count in real life. But the dark was absolute. I couldn't see anything except that blinking light. Then the whisper came again, right beside my ear this time. "You shouldn't have stayed awake." The window shattered. Cold air roared through the apartment, scattering glass like rain. Chloe screamed. Ethan pulled Sophie down. I covered my head, but through the chaos I saw it. The figure standing now, impossibly tall, its head tilted toward the camera. And then everything went silent. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe something else took the choice away. When I opened my eyes, sunlight poured weakly through the broken window. The candles were nothing but puddles of hardened wax. The clock on the wall read 7:11 a.m. At first everything felt almost normal, until I noticed Ethan sitting by the wall, staring blankly at nothing. His eyes were open, but his pupils didn't move. "Ethan?" I called softly. No answer. Sophie crouched next to him, trembling. "He's breathing, but he won't respond." Chloe was gone. Her sleeping bag lay near the couch, empty, a dark smear leading toward the hallway. Liam tore through the apartment, shouting her name until his voice broke. But there was no sign of her. No door open. No window big enough for anyone to crawl through. Just the wind, whistling through cracked glass. Marcus sat motionless on the floor, the camcorder in his lap. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "It's still recording," he whispered. I took the camera from his hands. The red light blinked weakly, almost out of battery. The screen was cracked but working. We gathered around it, me, Marcus, Sophie, and Liam, and pressed play. At first it was just us laughing, eating chips, telling stories. Then the video reached 3 a.m. when the weirdness began. We watched the curtains move, just as we remembered. But this time the figure by the window wasn't faint. It was there, clearly visible, a tall, colorless shape sitting among us like it belonged. It didn't flicker. It didn't move. It just was. Sometimes its head turned toward whoever was speaking, as though it were listening closely. Marcus's voice on the video laughed nervously. "If something weird happens, we'll catch it." And we did. At one point, the figure leaned forward and placed its hand on Ethan's shoulder, yet Ethan didn't flinch. None of us did. We couldn't see it, even though it was right there. The recording continued until the moment everything went dark. A final frame froze. 7 of us, sitting in a circle, smiling, unaware of the thing sitting perfectly still between Marcus and Chloe. Its face was pale, blurred, but somehow pleased. Then the video cut out. Sophie threw up in the sink. Liam smashed the camera against the floor until it shattered, but that didn't help. Ethan still hasn't spoken since that night. Chloe was never found. The rest of us never told anyone what really happened. We said she ran away. The police believed it. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I see movement in the corners of my room. A faint outline sitting patiently by the window, waiting. And every year around 3 a.m., I still hear that whisper again, soft and calm, right next to my ear. Don't look. When I look back on it now, that night feels like a dividing line between the kind of innocence you don't realize you have and the kind of fear you never shake. I was 15, just old enough to feel grown, but still young enough to believe. The world couldn't touch me. My name is Emma, and it was my house where it all happened. An old 2-story in the kind of quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. The kind of place where porch lights glowed like safety beacons, and neighbors waved when you biked by. It was Friday night, the first weekend after midterms, and for us girls, it meant freedom. My parents had gone out of town for a wedding, leaving me with a house to myself. Technically, my older brother was supposed to keep an eye on me, but he had his own plans, the kind that didn't involve babysitting his little sister and her friends. He promised he'd be home before midnight. He wasn't. Chloe was the loud one, always daring someone to do something dumb. Sarah was the jokester, quick with a laugh that could diffuse any tension. And Mia, she was my best friend since 3rd, grade cautious most of the time, but unable to resist proving she wasn't afraid when someone challenged her. The 4 of us dragged sleeping bags into the living room, stacked empty pizza boxes on the coffee table, and painted each other's nails while a slasher movie flickered on the TV. The house smelled like nail polish remover and pepperoni grease, and the glow of the screen painted us in pale blues and reds. We talked over the movie more than we watched it, laughing about how fake the blood looked or how stupid the characters were for running upstairs when everyone knows that's the worst move. At one point, Sarah suggested we play Truth or Dare, and that was where the whole night started sliding sideways. Chloe dared Mia to go onto the porch and yell something into the street. "Make it good," Chloe pressed. "Something that'll freak out the neighbors." Mia groaned, but pushed up from her blanket. She went barefoot, giggling as she pulled open the front door. I remember the cold air spilling in, the quiet of the neighborhood at 11:30 at night. Then she cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "Come get us," before bolting back inside like she just set off fireworks. We collapsed into laughter, slamming the door and locking it, cheeks hot with adrenaline. It felt harmless. Just another stupid dare and a night full of them. But sometimes one little thing sets off a chain you can't stop. By midnight, we were restless. The movie ended, the room dim except for the lamp. We lay in our sleeping bags, trading whispers and scrolling through our phones. That's when I heard it. Soft, almost polite, a tap at the front window. I froze. "Did you guys hear that?" "Probably the wind," Sarah muttered, not looking up. But then it came again. Tap, tap. Mia's phone light caught Chloe's face. She looked pale. "Wait, wasn't the porch light off?" I turned toward the curtains. A faint glow seeped around the edges. My parents always left the bulb burned out to save electricity. But now it glowed steady, yellow against the night. And behind it, I swore I saw movement. A shadow stretching tall across the glass. Mia yanked the curtain aside for a split second. Her scream pierced the room. Someone ducked out of sight. We scrambled, locking every door and window we could reach, the house suddenly unfamiliar and hostile. And then from the back of the house, another knock. "Call your brother," Chloe hissed. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone. The line rang, and when he answered, his voice was groggy. "I can't come now," he said. "I'm 20 minutes out. Just stay inside, lock the doors, don't do anything stupid." It was supposed to be reassuring, but it wasn't. We were 4 girls alone in a house that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. We killed the TV, leaving only the lamplight, which flickered like it couldn't decide whether to help us or betray us. Then the power went out. The lamp died. The fridge hummed to silence, and the house sank into darkness. The sudden quiet was worse than the noise. My chest felt hollow, and the only light came from the 4 of us scrambling for our phones, their cold glow making us look like ghosts. "Maybe it's just the breaker," Sarah said weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced. "What if he's inside?" Mia whispered, voice tight. "Don't say that," I snapped. Though the thought had already lodged itself in my head, every creak in the floor, every sigh of the house settling, felt like footsteps. We decided to move upstairs together as if height could keep us safe. We tiptoed, clutching our phones like lanterns. Just as we reached the landing, the sound came again. Footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate, like whoever it was knew we were listening. We locked my bedroom door and pressed against it as if our bodies alone could hold back what waited outside. "Do we call 911? I whispered. Chloe shook her head. "What if it's nothing? What if it's like some dumb neighbor messing around? We'll look crazy." But then we saw it from the crack under the door, a faint glow, light sweeping across the hallway wall, a flashlight beam. "Who's there?" Chloe yelled, her voice breaking. The beam clicked off. That was enough. I dialed 911, my thumb slipping on the screen. When the dispatcher's calm voice answered, I whispered everything. The taps, the shadow, the flashlight. She told us to stay quiet, stay locked in, and that officers were on the way. Minutes stretched into hours. Every sound felt amplified. The scrape of something against the siding, the groan of the house, the distant slam of a trash can. My heart kept time with the silence. Then finally, faint but growing. Sirens. Red and blue light spilled across my curtains, painting the room in pulsing color. Relief rushed through me so fast it made me dizzy. When the officers knocked and announced themselves, we stumbled down the stairs clinging to each other. The house looked normal too. Normal. The officers spread out across the yard with flashlights, their radios crackling. "Stay together," one of them said firmly. I hovered by the doorway, my pulse still hammering. A younger officer walked toward the side yard, his light cut across. The grass then froze. "Boot prints," he called out. They were fresh, pressed deep into the mud from the rain earlier that week. A path of them led around the house, circling it like someone had been pacing, watching. My stomach turned when the prints stopped right beneath the window where we'd been lying earlier. Then came the shout back here. We followed the beams toward the neighbor's shed. A man crouched in the shadows, tools scattered beside him, screwdrivers, pliers, a crowbar. He looked up as the officers closed in, his face half hidden beneath a hood, hands where I can see them. He didn't run. He just stood slowly like he'd been waiting to be caught. They cuffed him and led him past us. His eyes flicked up just once, locking on mine. I'll never forget that look, calm, almost amused, like the night had been a game to him. One officer pulled my mom's number from me and made the call. By the time my parents rushed home, pale and trembling, the man was already gone in the back of a cruiser. The police told us he'd been carrying tools to pry open doors. He hadn't broken in yet, but he'd been planning to. That night, none of us slept. We sat in a circle in the living room, whispering about every sound until dawn. The days after blurred. At school, we stuck together like glue. Everyone had heard rumors. Someone said the guy was a drifter. Someone else said he'd been spotted weeks before hanging around the park. Nobody really knew. I couldn't stop thinking about the dare about Mia standing barefoot on the porch shouting into the dark, "Come get us." It haunted me, like we'd summoned something. Chloe tried to brush it off, saying it was just coincidence, but even she had dark circles under her eyes. At night, I couldn't stand my room. The window felt too exposed. I started sleeping on the couch with the TV on low, the light and noise wrapping me like armor. Mia confessed she couldn't step outside alone after dark. Chloe admitted she dreamed about the flashlight beam sliding across the wall. Sarah, who used to laugh the loudest at scary movies, now flinched at shadows. One afternoon, my mom sat me down. "You girls did the right thing," she said softly. "You called. You didn't open the door. That's what saved you." But her voice carried a weight that told me the truth. What haunted her was what could have happened. Weeks passed and life settled, at least on the surface. Homework piled up. Basketball season started, and new gossip replaced the old. But beneath it, that night lived on in us. Sometimes when I walked home after school, I felt it. The prickling on the back of my neck like someone was just out of sight. I checked locks obsessively, pulled curtains tight, and never slept without a light on. The four of us drifted like people do, but whenever we got together, it always came up. We'd laugh nervously, call it the knock at the window, pretend it was a campfire story. But the laughter never lasted long. The truth is, that night broke something in us. It showed us how thin the wall between safety and danger really is. How fast innocence can turn to fear. Even now, years later, I can still hear it sometimes. The faint, polite tap at the window. The sound that changed everything. What happened to us was more than just a frightening story. It was a lesson carved deep. Never take safety for granted and never ignore the small warnings that something